My parents didn't feed my daughter for 2 days while I was in the hospital. She's just a temporary visitor. Mum said with disgust. Why should we waste our hard-earned money feeding someone else's worthless mistake when the real family needs that food? When my starving daughter desperately tried to eat a stale piece of bread, my sister caught her, ripped it away, threw it in the garbage, then dragged her outside by the hair while screaming. Mom, this ugly brat is stealing your food. My mother backhanded my daughter's face viciously and roared. How dare you? When I returned home, I found my 5-year-old daughter collapsed on the floor, barely breathing from starvation. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just silently destroyed everything they loved. The antiseptic smell of the hospital still clung to my clothes as I fumbled with my keys outside my childhood home. After 5 days of emergency surgery and recovery following a burst appendix, all I wanted was to hold my daughter Zoe and pretend the world made sense again. My parents had grudgingly agreed to watch her while I was hospitalized. Though their reluctance was palpable, even through my morphine haze. She's your responsibility, Natasha. My mother, Gloria, had said coldly when my friend Amber had called from the ambulance. But I suppose we can't let the child starve while you're having your medical emergency. Playing sick. As if I'd chosen to have my appendix ruptured during my night shift at the diner. The front door was unlocked, which struck me as odd. Gloria was obsessive about security, always lecturing about those people who might break in. I stepped inside, calling Zoe's name softly, not wanting to wake anyone if she was napping. The silence felt wrong. I checked the living room first, then the kitchen. Growing more anxious with each empty room. Finally, I heard a faint whimper coming from the back hallway near the laundry room. Following the sound, I found her. Zoe was collapsed on the cold linoleum floor. Her tiny frame curled into a ball. Her lips were cracked and pale. Her cheeks sunken when I knelt beside her. Her eyes fluttered open, dull and unfocused. Mommy. Her voice was barely a whisper. I'm here, baby. I'm here. I scooped her up, shocked by how light she felt. Her little sundress hung loose on her frame. And I could feel her rips through the thin fabric. That's when I heard Gloria's voice from the kitchen, casual and unconcerned. Oh, you're back about time. That child has been nothing but trouble. I carried Zoe to the kitchen where Gloria stood at the counter, calmly buttering toast. My sister Valerie sat at the table, scrolling through her phone while eating what looked like leftover pizza. What happened to her? My voice was steady, though. My hands shook as I held Zoe. Gloria barely glanced up. Nothing happened to her. She's just being dramatic. Kids these days are so spoiled. She's dehydrated, tired and starving. I grabbed a glass from the cabinet and filled it with water, helping Zoe take tiny sips. When was the last time you fed her? Fed her? Valerie laughed without looking up from her phone. Mom's not running a charity here, Natasha. That kid isn't our responsibility. She's 5 years old. She's just a temporary visitor, Gloria said with disgust, finally turning to face me. Why should we waste our hard-earned money feeding someone else's worthless mistake when the real family needs their food? The words hit me like physical blows, but I kept my expression neutral. Zoe was too weak to fully understand what was happening, but she pressed closer to me. Sensing the tension, I left money for groceries. I said quietly. We use that money for important things. Valerie chimed in. Mom needed new curtains for the dining room, and I had to get my nails done for Jake's company party. I stared at Valerie's perfectly manicured nails, gel extensions with tiny crystals that probably cost more than I made in a week at the diner. Meanwhile, my daughter had been slowly starving. What about the food that was already here? Gloria's face twisted with annoyance. That food is for family members who contribute to this household. Not for little mistakes who just take up space and air. She tried to steal food yesterday. Valerie added with a smirk. Mom caught her trying to eat a stale piece of bread from the counter. You should have seen the little brat scrambling around like a rat. My blood went cold. She was hungry. She was stealing, Gloria snapped. I don't tolerate thieves in my house. No matter how small they are. Valerie giggled. I caught her first, actually ripped that nasty bread right out of her grubby little hands and threw it where it belonged in the garbage. Then I dragged her outside by the hair while screaming. Mom, this ugly brat is stealing your food. You should have heard her crying. Zoe whimpered and buried her face against my shoulder. The pieces were falling into place, creating a picture so horrific I could barely process it. And then what happened? My voice was still eerily calm. Gloria's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. I backhanded her face to teach her some respect and murmured, how dare you touch our food? She learned her lesson real quick. After that, I looked down at Zoe's face and saw the fading bruise on her left cheek that I'd initially attributed to a fall. The handprint shape was unmistakable now. She's been sleeping on the floor in the hallway, I observed. The couch is too good for her. Valerie said. Besides, we needed a living room for our shows. That kids crying was getting annoying. I stood there holding my barely conscious daughter while these two women, my mother and sister, discussed her suffering like it was a minor inconvenience. Zoe's breathing was shallow, her little body limp with exhaustion and dehydration. I need to take her to the hospital. I said you just came from the hospital. Gloria scoffed, always so dramatic. She'll be fine when she gets some water. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't scream or throw things or demand explanations. I simply walked out of that house carrying Zoe, drove straight to the emergency room and watched as doctors and nurses swarmed around my malnourished child. Severe dehydration, acute malnutrition, evidence of physical abuse. We'll need to report this to Child Protective Services, the doctor explained. The social worker's questions came in a blur, as so he received 4 fluids and finally fell into a peaceful sleep. Color slowly returning to her cheeks. Where has she been staying? The social worker asked. With my family while I was hospitalized. And they didn't feed her for 3 days. Apparently not. The social worker's expression hardened. Ma'am, this could have killed her. A few more hours and we might be having a very different conversation. I signed papers, answered questions, and held Zoe's small hand as she slept. But inside, something cold and calculating was taking shape. A plan born not from rage, but from the crystal clear understanding that some people don't deserve the air they breathe. Zoe spent 4 days in the hospital recovering. During that time, CPS opened an investigation and I provided detailed statements about Gloria and Valerie's treatment of Zoe. But I also made phone calls, sent emails, and gathered information. I was methodical, thorough, and completely focused. Gloria worked as a bookkeeper for a small construction company. She'd been skimming money for years. Small amounts at first, but growing bolder as time went on. I knew this because she'd bragged about her creative accounting methods during family dinners, thinking she was clever. What she didn't know was that I'd been documenting her admissions for months on my phone initially, just because her attitude disgusted me. I sent an anonymous email to the construction company's owner with detailed information about Gloria's embezzlement, including dates, amounts, and methods she confessed to. I also forwarded copies to the state tax authority and the IRS. Since she hadn't been reporting her stolen income. Valerie worked at an upscale boutique where she spent most of her time posting social media content instead of helping customers. She'd been selling store inventory online and pocketing the profits using the boutique's business account to ship items to buyers while reporting them as damaged merchandise in the inventory system. I knew about this because she boasted about her side business and even shown me her online sales listings during a family gathering. I created a detailed report documenting Valerie's theft ring, complete with screenshots of her selling posts I'd saved and evidence of the fraudulent inventory reports she bragged about. This went to her manager, the store owner and the police. But I wasn't done. Gloria was obsessively proud of her house, the pristine lawn, the expensive furniture, the chain of cabinet filled with collectibles she'd spent decades acquiring. She'd often mentioned that her homeowner's insurance policy was outdated, covering far less than the actual value of her possessions. She kept meaning to update it, but never got around to the paperwork. Valerie's prized possession was her car, a brand new BMW she'd financed at an astronomical interest rate to maintain her image. She'd also been posting constantly on social media about her lavish lifestyle, not realizing she was creating a digital trail of insurance fraud waiting to happen. The beauty of my plan was its simplicity. I didn't have to do anything illegal or dangerous. I just had to let their own choices catch up with them. Gloria's employer began an investigation and suspended her within a week. After 2 weeks of investigation, they fired her and filed charges for embezzlement. The investigation revealed she'd stolen over $30,000 over 2 years. Her assets were frozen pending the criminal case. Valerie was terminated after a 3-day investigation and arrested the following week. Her theft ring had netted her nearly $15,000 in stolen merchandise. The boutique owner was pressing charges for both theft and fraud. But the real devastation came from their lifestyle choices, catching up with them. Without Gloria's income, she couldn't make her mortgage payments. The house she'd been so proud of went into foreclosure. Within 3 months, her precious china collection and furniture were sold at auction to pay legal fees. Valerie's BMW was repossessed when she couldn't make payments without her job. Her credit cards were maxed out. Her apartment lease broken and her social media accounts became a source of evidence against her in court. The criminal charges stuck. Gloria was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution. Valerie got 15 months and probation, along with a felony record that would follow her forever. Additionally, CPS filed charges against both of them for child endangerment and abuse related to Zoe's treatment. I watched it all unfold from a distance, feeling nothing but cold satisfaction. Zoe and I had moved to a small apartment across town where she slowly recovered from her trauma with the help of therapy and regular meals. She never asked about her grandmother or aunt, and I never brought them up. But the aftermath of my calculated revenge was more thorough than I'd even anticipated. Gloria's financial ruin went deeper than just losing her job in-house. The IRS audit I triggered revealed years of unreported income, resulting in additional penalties and interest that would follow her for decades. Her credit was destroyed, making it nearly impossible to rent decent housing or secure employment in her field. Valerie's situation deteriorated even faster. Her arrest had been public enough to make local news. Boutique employee arrested in elaborate theft scheme, and the story spread through social media. Her carefully curated Instagram presence, once filled with designer outfits and expensive dinners, became evidence of her fraud. Before her arrest, every post showing off merchandise she claimed as gifts from work was screenshot by investigators and used against her in court. The domino effect was beautiful in its completeness. Gloria's construction company job had provided health insurance, and losing it meant she couldn't afford her blood pressure medication. The stress of the criminal charges and financial ruin caused her health to spiral rapidly. She'd always been vain about her appearance, but the combination of stress, poor nutrition from her limited budget and untreated medical conditions aided her dramatically. Valerie's BMW repossession happened at her workplace, creating a spectacle that ensured everyone knew about her financial troubles. Her co-workers, who had envied her lifestyle, suddenly understood that it had all been built on theft. She became a pariah in her social circle, unable to maintain the friendships that had been based solely on her perceived wealth and status. Meanwhile, I documented every development meticulously. Not out of cruelty, but out of a mother's fierce protectiveness. I needed to ensure they could never hurt Zoe again. Never find a way back into our lives when their circumstances became desperate enough. The CPS caseworker assured me that with their criminal convictions for child abuse, they would never be allowed unsupervised contact with Zoe again. The therapy sessions with Zoe were revealing in ways I hadn't expected. Dr. Stevens, a child psychologist who specialized in trauma, helped me understand the full extent of what Zoe had endured during those 5 days. Children her age can develop lasting food anxieties from even brief periods of starvation. Dr. Stevens explained during one of our sessions the fact that Zoe is eating normally and not hoarding food is actually remarkable. It suggests her sense of security with you is incredibly strong. Zoe's nightmares when they came weren't about hunger. They were about being abandoned. About me not coming back from the hospital. During one particularly difficult night, she crawled into my bed, sobbing. What if you get sick again and have to leave me with them? I will never leave you with them again. I promised. Never. No matter what happens to me, I've made arrangements with people who will love and protect you. It was true. I'd updated my will, established a trust fund and arranged for Zoe's care with my friend Amber, who had children of her own and understood the situation. Gloria and Valerie would never have legal access to Zoe, no matter what happened to me. The social worker checked in regularly at first, amazed by Zoe's progress. She went from a hollow-eyed, frightened child to a bright, curious 5-year-old who laughed and played like she should have been doing all along. You've done an amazing job helping her heal, the social worker told me during one visit. She's resilient, I replied. Watching Zoe color the kitchen table. Children are stronger than people think. But I also learned disturbing details about those 5 days that Zoe had been too traumatized to share initially in therapy through play and art. She revealed that Valerie hadn't just denied her food. She taunted her with it, eating cookies in front of her while telling her she didn't deserve any, making elaborate meals and forcing Zoe to watch from the hallway while the real family eat. Gloria had been equally cruel in smaller ways. She'd made Zoe ask permission to use the bathroom to get a drink of water to sit down. She criticized everything about Zoe's appearance, calling her hair ratty and her clothes cheap garbage. She told Zoe that I didn't really love her, that I'd abandoned her at the hospital and probably wouldn't come back. They were trying to break her spirit. Dr. Stevens explained to me privately. This wasn't just neglect. It was psychological abuse designed to make her feel worthless and unwanted. Learning these details only reinforced my conviction that what I had done was necessary. These weren't people who had made a mistake or acted out of desperation. They were people who had enjoyed causing suffering to a vulnerable child. The beauty of my revenge plan became even clearer as months passed. I hadn't needed to lie, manipulate, or break any laws. I had simply ensured that their existing crimes were exposed and that their lifestyle choices caught up with them. Gloria had been embezzling for years. I just made sure her employer found out. Valerie had been running a theft operation for months. I just documented it properly for the authorities. Their downfall was entirely self-inflicted. I've rarely been the catalyst that started the chain reaction they'd set in motion through their own choices. 2 years after the hospital incident, I received a letter from Gloria. She was writing from prison, begging me to visit her, claiming she had learned her lesson and wanted to make amends. I threw the letter away without reading it completely. Valerie tried calling collect from jail a few times initially, but after I never accepted the charges, she stopped trying. Word of their arrest spread quickly through our small community. Gloria had always presented herself as a pillar of respectability. The church-going woman who volunteered at charity drives and criticized others for their moral failings. The revelation of her embezzlement sent shockwaves through her social circle. The same people who had once got her approval now whispering behind her back about her hypocrisy. Valerie's downfall was equally public and humiliating. Her social media followers, who had envied her lifestyle, watched in real time as her world crumbled. She'd been too vain to delete her accounts even after her arrest, and the contrast between her old post flaunting expensive purchases and her new reality became a source of entertainment for her former admirers. The local newspaper covered both cases, though they didn't connect the family relationship. Bookkeeper embezzled thousands from local business, ran alongside boutique employee charged and theft ring. I kept those clippings not out of malice, but as documentation of justice finally being served. During this period, I threw myself into rebuilding our lives with methodical precision. I researched the best schools in our new neighborhood, enrolled Zoe in swimming lessons to help with her coordination and confidence, and established routines that made her feel secure. Every decision was made with her healing in mind. Our new apartment became a sanctuary. I let Zoe choose the color for her bedroom walls. She picked the soft lavender that made her eyes light up when the morning sun headed just right. We planted herbs on the windowsill, and I taught her to help with cooking, showing her that food was abundant and always available. Can I have a snack? Mama became a question she asked freely, without the hesitation that had marked her first few weeks after the hospital. My response was always yes, always encouraging. She learned to trust that there would always be enough, that she would never have to go hungry again. The therapy sessions also revealed how Zoe had tried to protect me during those awful 3 days. Dr. Stevens helped her express how she tried not to cry too loudly because Gloria had said it would make me sicker in the hospital. How? She tried to be good and not complain, hoping it would make them nicer to her. She internalized the abuse as her fault. Dr. Stevens explained that's common in children who experience trauma. They believe if they're just good enough, quite enough, small enough, the bad treatment will stop. This revelation broke my heart in ways I hadn't expected, even while being starved and tormented. Zoe had been trying to protect my feelings and earn love through compliance. The depth of their cruelty and exploiting a child's natural desire to please felt unforgivable. I began volunteering at the local domestic violence shelter, partly to process my own anger constructively and partly to help other women and children who have faced similar situations. Working with families who had escaped abusive situations gave me perspective on our own recovery and helped me recognize how much progress Zoe was making. One evening, about 8 months after we'd left Gloria's house, Zoe was playing with dolls when I overheard her conversation with them. She was playing house, and one doll was the mama while another was the little girl. "Don't worry, baby," she said to the smaller doll. "Mama will always come back. Mama will always keep you safe and give you food when you're hungry." The scene was both heartbreaking and hopeful. She was rewriting the narrative through play, creating the safety and security she'd been denied during those terrible days. A year later, I ran into Gloria's former neighbor at the grocery store. She told me how shocked everyone had been by the arrests, the foreclosure, the scandal. "Your mother seemed like such a respectable woman," the neighbor said. "Who would have thought she was capable of such things? People show their true character when they think no one's watching," I replied. The neighbor nodded sympathetically. "It's just terrible what happened to that poor child, Zoe, wasn't it? I hope she's doing better now." "She's thriving," I said truthfully. "She's in kindergarten now, making friends, learning to read. She's exactly where she should be." Zoe was indeed thriving. The hollow-cheeked, frightened little girl who'd collapsed on Gloria's floor was now a confident child who knew she was loved and protected. She'd started calling me Mama instead of Mommy. After we moved to our new apartment. A small change that somehow felt monumental. 2 years after the incident, I received another letter from Gloria. This time it was longer, more desperate. She'd been released from prison but couldn't find work with her criminal record. She was living in a halfway house, struggling to make ends meet. She wanted to see Zoe, to apologize, to be part of our lives again. I burned that letter in the kitchen sink. Valerie fared slightly better upon her release. She found work at a discount store in another town and was slowly rebuilding her life. She never tried to contact me directly, but I heard through mutual acquaintances that she told people I was vindictive and cruel for not helping family in their time of need. I felt no guilt about their situations. They made their choices long before I helped expose them. The embezzlement, the theft, the fraud. Those were their decisions. I simply ensured that actions have consequences. Zoe started first grade in our new neighborhood, where nobody knew our history. She made friends, easily invited classmates over for playdates and never mentioned feeling hungry or scared. Her teacher commented on how well-adjusted and confident she seemed. "She's such a sweet little girl," Mrs. Anderson told me during parent-teacher conferences. Very empathetic toward other children. Always sharing her snacks and including everyone in games. I smiled at that. Zoe's generosity was genuine. The generosity of a child who remembered what it felt like to have nothing and was determined that others would never feel the same way. One evening, as I tucked Zoe into her own bed in her own room, she looked up at me with serious eyes. "Mama, why don't we see Grandma Gloria and Aunt Valerie anymore?" It was the first time she'd asked directly. I'd prepared for this moment, knowing it would come eventually. Sometimes people make choices that hurt others. I said carefully, "When that happens, it's okay to keep yourself safe by staying away from them." She considered this for a moment. "Did they make choices that hurt me?" "Yes, sweetheart, they did." She nodded solemnly. "I'm glad we live here now. I feel safe with you. You are safe with me always." 3 years after the incident, I heard that Gloria had found work as a night cleaner at an office building. The pay was minimal, the hours brutal, and she'd aged significantly from the stress. Valerie was still working. Retail. Living paycheck to paycheck. Her dreams of luxury long forgotten. I felt no satisfaction in their continued struggles, but I felt no pity either. They'd chosen to starve and abuse a 5-year-old child in their care. Every hardship they faced was simply the natural consequence of being the kind of people who could look at a hungry child and feel nothing but contempt. Zoe was 7, now excelling in school and participating in gymnastics. She'd grown tall and strong, her eyes bright with curiosity and confidence. She had friends who came to our apartment for her birthday parties, and she talked excitedly about becoming a veterinarian when she grew up. "I want to help animals that can't help themselves," she explained over dinner one night. "That's a wonderful goal," I told her. "What made you think of that?" She shrugged. "I just think everyone deserves to be taken care of, even if they're small or can't ask for help." I watched her finish her meal. She always cleaned her plate and never hoarded food. Or ate frantically. The trauma of starvation had faded, leaving behind only a deep appreciation for kindness and security. 5 years later, Zoe was 9 and thriving in 3rd grade when I received an unexpected phone call. Gloria had suffered a heart attack and was in the hospital. The halfway house manager had found my number in her personal effects as her emergency contact. "She's asking for you," the manager said. "And for someone named Zoe." I hung up without responding. That evening, Zoe found me sitting quietly in the kitchen, processing the news. "Is everything okay, Mama? Your grandmother is in the hospital?" I said simply. "She's very sick." Zoe climbed into my lap, something she rarely did now that she was getting older. "Are you sad?" I considered the question. "Honestly. No, sweetheart, I'm not sad." "Is that okay?" "Yes, it's okay. We don't have to feel sad about people who chose to hurt us. Even if they're family." She snuggled closer. "I love our family. Just you and me." "I love our family, too." Gloria died 2 days later. The funeral was small. Just a few people from the halfway house. And her former neighbor. I didn't attend and I didn't tell Zoe about it until weeks later. Valerie called me after the funeral, crying and accusing me of being heartless. "She was our mother, Natasha. How could you not even come to her funeral? She stopped being my mother the day she decided my daughter wasn't worth feeding." I replied calmly. "You destroyed our family over one mistake." "I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped protecting people who didn't deserve protection." Valerie hung up on me, but I wasn't done. "And Valerie, it wasn't one mistake. It was a pattern of cruelty that revealed who you really were. The embezzlement and theft were just confirmation of what I already knew." 6 years had passed since that horrible day I found. Zoe collapsed on Gloria's floor. She was now 10 years old, confident and happy with no memory of ever feeling unloved or unwanted. We built a life together, filled with security, kindness and mutual respect. I never told Zoe the full details of what her grandmother and aunt had done to her. She knew they'd been unkind, and that's why we didn't see them anymore. That was enough. She didn't need to carry the burden of their cruelty. Instead, I focused on teaching her about real family. The people who show up for you, who protect you, who would never let you go hungry or feel unloved. We created our own traditions, our own support system of friends, and chosen family who celebrated her achievements and comforted her during difficult times. The apartment we moved to after leaving Gloria's house had become a real home. Zoe's artwork covered the refrigerator. Her books filled the shelves, and every corner held memories of laughter and love. It was nothing like the cold, unwelcoming house where she'd nearly died of starvation. But it was ours. Sometimes I wondered if my revenge had been to throw to calculated. Then I would remember the sight of Zoe's small body collapsed on that floor. Her lips cracked from dehydration, her hollow eyes barely focusing on my face. I would remember Gloria's casual dismissal of her suffering and Valerie's cruel laughter as she described dragging a starving child around by her hair. No, they got exactly what they deserved. The truth was, I hadn't destroyed Gloria and Valerie's lives. I'd simply stopped enabling them to avoid the consequences of their choices. The embezzlement, the theft, the fraud. Those were their decisions. The cruelty towards Zoe was their decision. I just made sure those decisions caught up with them. Zoe was 11 when she asked me why I'd never remarried or dated anyone. "Seriously? Don't you get lonely?" "Mama, I have you," I said. "And I have friends and work that I enjoy. My life feels full." She considered this. "But wouldn't it be nice to have someone to help take care of us?" I smiled at her mature concern. "Sweetheart, we take care of each other. That's what real family does." "Yeah," she agreed. "We're pretty good at it, too." We were good at it. We'd survived Gloria's cruelty. The trauma of near starvation and the upheaval of starting over. We built something stronger than what we'd lost. Something based on genuine love rather than obligation or manipulation. 7 years after the incident, I was promoted to assistant manager at the diner where I'd worked throughout Zoe's early childhood. The pay increase allowed us to move to a larger apartment with a yard where Zoe could practice gymnastics and grow a small garden. "Look, Mama," she called one afternoon, holding up a tomato. She'd grown herself. "It's perfect." I watched her examine the tomato with pride and satisfaction. And I thought about how different this moment was from her childhood memories of being denied even stale bread. She'd grown into someone who created abundance rather than hoarding it, who shared generously because she knew what it felt like to have nothing. That night, as I was talking her into bed, Zoe said something that made me realize how complete our healing had been. "Mama, I think I want to be a teacher instead of a veterinarian." "Oh. What changed your mind?" "I want to help kids who feel scared or alone. I want them to know that someone cares about them." I kissed her forehead. Overwhelmed by how this child, who had experienced such cruelty, had grown into someone dedicated to kindness. "I think you'd be an amazing teacher, sweetheart." 8 years later. So he was 12, and we received news that Valerie had been arrested again. This time for check fraud. She'd been struggling financially since Gloria's death and had apparently returned to her old patterns of stealing to maintain her lifestyle. I felt nothing when I heard the news. No satisfaction, no sadness, no anger. Valerie had made her choice just as she'd made the choice to drag a starving child around by her hair. Some people never learn. Zoe overheard me talking to a friend about Valerie's arrest. Is that my aunt? She asked later. Yes. The one who was mean to me when I was little? Yes. She nodded thoughtfully. I'm sorry. She's still making bad choices. But I'm glad we don't have to worry about her anymore. At 12 years old, Zoe had more wisdom and maturity than Gloria or Valerie had repossessed. She understood that some people choose to be harmful and that it's okay to protect yourself from them, even if they're technically family. The revenge I had taken wasn't about anger or hatred. It had been about justice. Ensuring that people who had starved and abused a child faced consequences for their actions. It had been about protection, making sure Zoe never had to endure their cruelty again, legally guaranteed by their criminal convictions. But most importantly, it had been about love. Everything I'd done had been to create a safe space where Zoe could heal and grow into the remarkable person she was meant to be. As I watched her practice her gymnastics routine in our backyard, her face glowing with health and confidence, I knew I'd made the right choices. She would never again know what it felt like to be hungry, unwanted, or unsafe. She would never doubt that she was loved and valued. That was worth every moment of the cold, calculated revenge I had taken on the people who tried to break her spirit. Zoe was 13 when she came home from school with tears in her eyes. There's a girl in my class whose parents don't feed her properly. She said she never has lunch money and she's always so skinny. It makes me remember. What do you want to do about it? I asked. Can we pack extra food in my lunch so I can share with her? Of course. But, Zoe, if you think she's being abused or neglected, we should also talk to her teacher or the school counselor. She nodded. Seriously? I already did. Mrs. Rhodes is going to look into it. I hugged her tight, proud, beyond words of the compassionate young woman she'd become. She remembered what it felt like to be that hungry child, and she was determined to make sure others didn't suffer the same way. That night, I packed 2 full lunches for Zoe to take to school. It became our new routine. Always extra food to share, always watching out for children who might need help. Mama, Zoe said one evening as we prepared her school lunches together. Do you think Grandma Gloria and I'm Valerie? Ever think about what they did to me? It was the first time in years she brought them up unprompted. I don't know, sweetheart, but it doesn't matter what they think. What matters is that you're safe and loved now. I know. I just hope they learned something from what happened to them. I doubted they had what I didn't see. So Zoe's capacity for hope and forgiveness was part of what made her special. And I wouldn't diminish that by sharing my cynicism. 9 years after the incident that had changed our lives, Zoe was 14 and thriving. She maintained excellent grades while volunteering at the local animal shelter and tutoring younger students. She'd grown into a beautiful teenager, but more importantly, she'd grown into a kind and confident young woman. The revenge had taken on Gloria, and Valerie felt like ancient history now. They were footnotes in our story, not the main characters. Zoe rarely mentioned them, and when she did it was with the detached curiosity of someone examining a period of history that no longer had power over her. Our life was full of new experiences, new relationships, new dreams. Zoe was talking about colleges considering majors that would allow her to help others. She wanted to study social work or education fields where she could make a difference in children's lives. I want to be the kind of person who protects kids, she told me. Like you protected me. I've done more than protect her, though. I've shown her that actions have consequences, that people who choose cruelty don't get to escape the results of their choices. And that's sometimes the most loving thing you can do, is refuse to enable harmful behavior. Zoe understood all of this, even if she'd never had the full details. She knew that we've left toxic people behind and built something better. She knew that family isn't about blood, but about love, loyalty, and respect. As she prepared for her sophomore year of high school, confident and secure in ways that 5-year-old collapsed on Gloria's floor could never have imagined, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction, not because Gloria and Valerie had suffered. Their suffering had been their own doing, but because Zoe had flourished. The revenge had been swift and thorough. But the healing had been slow and steady. Both had been necessary. Both had been acts of love. 10 years later, as Zoe prepared for college, she asked me one final question about that dark period of our lives. Mama, do you ever regret how things ended with them? I looked at my beautiful, confident, compassionate daughter, this young woman who'd survived starvation and abuse to become someone dedicated to helping others, and gave her the only honest answer. I had no, sweetheart. I don't regret protecting you from people who chose to be cruel. I will never regret choosing you over them. She smiled and hugged me tight. I'm glad you chose me too. That was the last time we talked about Gloria and Valerie. Zoe was ready to move forward into her own life, carrying with her the lessons of resilience, kindness, and the knowledge that she deserved to be loved and protected. The revenge had been complete, but the healing was the real victory.